Hello, my name is Erin Gambrell, and I work at the Mount Airy Library in Carroll County Public Library, and I am also a NASA Solar System Ambassador. So that means I'm an official volunteer for NASA, and one thing I get to do with that is do really fun programs about space throughout the county. Usually that involves some kind of science or me talking about some of the space exploration missions that NASA has done. But I really think a fun presentation to do would be one about space poop, tales of bathroom do's and don'ts in outer space. I read a lot about outer space, about past missions, future missions, things they're working on. And one of the things I find very fascinating and very silly is how they use the bathroom in space. So that is what this very brief presentation is about. Okay, are you ready? Here we go. I can hit my keyboard. There we go. Okay. Do watch for flying poo. So on Apollo 10, something escaped from a bag, prompting an uncomfortable conversation among the three astronauts. Get me a napkin, quick! There's a turd floating in the air. I didn't do it. It ain't one of mine. Mine was a little more sticky than that. I don't think it's one of mine. So on Apollo 10, which was really the dress rehearsal for Apollo 13, where these three astronauts that you see here all went up into space, and they did everything as if they were going to land on the moon, but they did not land on the moon. There was a loose bag of some poop that got in the air, and so they had to grab it and do away with it. So there's many dangers when traveling into outer space, but one of them is kind of way grosser than some of the others. Okay, don't eat too much potassium. So astronaut John Young was not the only astronaut to develop a serious case of flatulence while on duty, but he was certainly the only one whose gastrointestinal discomfort was broadcast live to the entire world. So they packed a lot of oranges for him and for the other astronauts so that their potassium levels would stay up. One of the previous missions that they had been on, they noticed that the potassium levels had gone down, and so they thought this would be a good way to help with that health aspect. However, it has a pretty smelly side effect. And so this quote that you see here was actually it was actually recorded through NASA when Mission Control was on the phone with them and talking with them. And here we see John Young, and he says, "I have the farts again. I got them again, Charlie. I haven't eaten this much citrus fruit in 20 years. And he goes on to say that he would like to never see an orange again. So this actually came from not a space book that I read, but this came from a book that I read about Florida, which, as you know, Florida is very famous for its oranges. So as you'll see throughout the presentation, the source materials where I got some of these quotes from are listed at the bottom. Okay, do pee on a tire before liftoff. So on the day of his launch, Yuri Gagarin peed on the back tires of the bus that was taking him to the launch pad. It has become a tradition for cosmonauts traveling to space from Baikonur to do the same. So Yuri Gagarin was the first man ever in space, first person ever in space, but definitely the first man. And he was a Russian, and so that's where they're taking off from, is in Russia. And then ever since that one launch pad that's at Baikonur, even if it's a person from a different country, because we're all kind of now sharing launch pads, they will make it a tradition to pee on the back tires. So since then, there have been many lady astronauts, and I mean, it would be very uncomfortable for a lady astronaut to do that. So what they do instead is they take a little vial of their own urine with them, and they ceremoniously pour it on the back tire, and that gives them good luck in space. So here we have a picture of Yuri Gagarin, and he says, Poyakali, this means let's go in English, and it's one of the things that he said before taking off. Okay, don't throw your poop into orbit. So if you know orbit, when something is orbiting something, it moves around in the same track, kind of like if you go to a walking track or a running track and you see people running around and around, it's the same loop. So in an interview about his Gemini 12 mission, Buzz Aldrin said, "I just tossed them. I'd put those three bags on a free return trajectory." So Buzz Aldrin is very, very famous for being the second man on the moon. But before he was on Apollo 11, he was in the Gemini project and he flew up in Gemini 12. And in that space mission, he and his fellow astronaut had tossed 3 bags of their poop out into space, and it went on an orbit. And an orbit later, we looked out the window and there were 3 bags in a row heading straight for us. So there they are, waiting for that poop to come back and hit their spacecraft. Okay, do wear a diaper. So astronauts wear diapers. No, they're not pull-ups, but they are called maximum absorption garments, also shortened to MAGs. And it collects your pee when nature calls. So in these fancy spacesuits that they wear, deep down in there's the big old diaper that they're wearing, and here we have our astronaut saying, "Too bad, it's 238,900 miles to the nearest porta potty because I've gotta go." And so actually in this picture you see Buzz Aldrin right there, and who is taking the picture is Neil Armstrong. Don't forget to look outside. When you're traveling in space, you're definitely going to want to look outside because it's gorgeous and beautiful and you've never seen anything like it before. However, when urine that you've peed into your space toilet in your spacecraft, when it is released out into the cold vacuum of space, it freezes into crystals, which float off in a pretty shower. So you could also be looking outside and be like, "Oh, what are those beautiful crystals?" Well, they're your pee. So here we have our astronaut, Schweikart, and he says the most beautiful sight in orbit is a urine dump at sunset. So this is astronaut Russell Schweikart who says this. So we'll have to trust their judgment. I think very few of us will be able to experience that in real life. Okay, do check your nozzles. So a nozzle is something like like on the end of a garden hose, something where water comes out. Sometimes they're really tiny, sometimes they're a little bit bigger. But during a 1984 mission on the Space Shuttle Discovery, the aircraft's wastewater venting system failed, leading to the formation of a very large icicle made of urine on the outside of the shuttle. So what happened was the nozzle where all of the wastewater, which means your urine and your poop and everything, is coming out, that failed. So it got sort of clogged up, and then it made this, because it's really cold out in space, it made this big icicle start to form. Well, how did they take care of it? This is what they did. Since a pee cycle could damage the shuttle on re-entry into Earth's atmosphere, we had to break it off with the shuttle's robotic arm. So on the shuttle, there is a robotic arm that comes off. And usually what that arm is used for is for repairing satellites and grabbing other like debris that might be out in space to research and examine it. But when this happened, they couldn't, they thought that the icicle, the pee-cicle, was going to damage the spacecraft when they went to go fly back into Earth's atmosphere, so they really had to get rid of it. So here comes out the space robotic arm, and it breaks off the pea icicle and sends it off into its own orbit into space. And fun fact about that robotic arm, Sally Ride, the first American woman in space, was one of the astronauts who worked on that. Okay, don't hold it in for too long. I think this is my favorite story. On a 14-day flight on Gemini 7, astronaut Frank Borman had a simple way to deal with the pooping problem. He simply wouldn't confront it. Through sheer will and orneriness, Borman made it through the first week, and then through an 8th day, but no man can hold out forever. So he thought he was going to be able to go 2 full weeks, 14 days without pooping. And he was wrong. He couldn't do it, which is good. You shouldn't do that. Your body should be getting rid of that waste. So this is a real quote. He says to Jim Lovell here, "Jim, I think this is it." And Jim says, "Frank, you only have 5 more days left to go here." These two were also on Apollo missions, so this was during a Gemini mission, but Frank Lovell is very famous for being the head astronaut on Apollo 13. So he helped to save the lives of his crew by some quick thinking during Apollo 13. Do leave your poop on the moon. Given that most of the Apollo missions stayed on the moon for about a day, it stands to reason that the men who walked at some point had to do their business. They did, and they left it behind, about 96 bags of it. That is entirely true. There are currently 96 bags, so almost 100 bags, of poop and pee and vomit, because space travel makes you sick to your stomach sometimes, that are left on the moon. And there they are. Future space archaeologists are sure to find bags of urine, feces, and the contents of nauseated stomachs when humans return to the moon someday. They may even test the material to see whether the flora inside the human byproducts survived and mutated. So maybe it's going to be good for testing in the future. But really, why did they leave those things there? Not because they really wanted to litter, but because they wanted to create less weight and less clutter, because that would create the potentiality for more problems on the flight home. So they left it on the moon. And that's it. There's our space poop. So you learned a lot about space poop. There's so much more to learn. I couldn't fit it all in. But if you have a favorite space poop story, or you've heard something that's really hilarious, please let me know in the comments. Thank you so much. Bye.